Hello, everyone. Today, we will be exploring the theory of transactional distance and its application to legal education from the perspective of a faculty member of a law school, greatly influenced from his disposition as an advocate of legal education reform and as a former LEB commissioner representing the student sector. Okay, so before we proceed with the Q&A proper, let me just introduce to you a brief discussion of the theory of transactional distance. So the proponent of transactional distance is Michael Moore. Okay, but transaction as a concept was derived from John Dewey and developed by Boyd and Apps in 1980. So transaction connotes the interplay among the environment, okay, the individuals, and the pattern of behaviors in any situation. Applying this concept in distance education, transactional distance is the interplay between people who are the teachers and the learners in an environment that have the special characteristic of being separate from one another. Take note though that transactional distance is present in any educational event, even in a face-to-face encounter. That is why transactional distance is not a matter of geographic distance, but a pedagogical phenomenon. It looks into the effect that geographic separation has on teaching and learning, especially on interaction between learners and teachers, on the design of courses, and on the organization of human and technological resources. I like how the classic course manual on distance education simplifies this theory. There is transactional distance in any educational event when the distance leads to a communication gap, a psychological space of potential misunderstandings between the behavior of the instructors and those of the learners. So that the transactional distance has to be overcome by instructional design and interaction procedures. So the transaction calls for special organizational and teaching behaviors in order to overcome the communication gap. And these teaching behaviors, according to Moore, are or would entail two sets of variables labeled as dialogue and structure. So dialogue refers to any form of interaction between the teacher and the learner with an interplay of words, actions, and ideas. Structure, on the other hand, refers to the extent that objectives, content, themes, implementation, and evaluation procedures are able to meet a particular learner's program needs. Okay, so just to give an example, a video recorded lecture is highly structured. Okay, its structure is predetermined, so it has higher transactional distance. However, if you have an online synchronous activity, the dialogue there is greater, although it is less structured, but the transactional distance is low. Okay, so that's just an example of dialogue and structure, so that we can better understand it. Okay. However, Moore declared that focusing only on the variables of teaching, particularly on structure and dialogue, would be flawed. So he added another dimension, and this is the dimension of learner's autonomy. Okay, learner's autonomy refers to the learner's different capacities for making decisions regarding their own learning. Okay, so the interplay of structure and dialogue, okay, with its effect on or impact to learner's autonomy would be how we wrap the theory of transactional distance. Okay, so I hope that you have a good grasp of this theory. And now, before we proceed with the Q&A proper, I'd like to introduce to you, of course, our speaker. He will be our resource person who would enlighten us on the application of this theory in a law school. So our speaker is a faculty member of the De La Salle University School of Law. He is a former commissioner of the Legal Education Board representing the student sector. He obtained his Master of Laws from the University of Michigan Law School through a Fulbright scholarship. Okay. He is also currently the director of Center for Legal Education Center for Legal Education, Advocacy, and Reform. Okay. So without much ado, let us welcome with us Attorney Justin De Susukang. Good afternoon, sir. Hello, how are
Good
you?
afternoon. Good afternoon, Dean. I'm doing good. Good afternoon, everyone who might be watching this video.
Okay.
Thanks for having me here.
Okay. Thank you too for accepting this invitation despite the typhoon. Okay. And including us in your hectic schedule. Okay, so Sir Justin, could you give us a brief background of your teaching modality now that we shifted away from face-to-face or conventional education?
Okay, so because of the pandemic, we were forced, together with the entire law school, in fact, even the entire legal education sector was forced to migrate to purely online learning, the ODL. So purely online, meaning to say we can't do on-site classes. So it's not hybrid, no no on-site classes, not a hybrid class. So it's purely online. So what we do is basically before sometime in the middle of the lockdown, I remember the Legal Education Board issued some guidelines. So those guidelines are recommended to be followed in the current duration of the pandemic. So the law school, since it's under the supervision of the Legal Education Board, followed them. But fortunately, the guidelines were sufficient, gave law school sufficient leeway on what to adapt. The guidelines call for the adoption of a flexible learning. So I think it's just a change in nomenclature. It's still basically ODL, online distance learning, flexible in such a way that maybe for some schools in some areas of the Philippines, they may not need to do pure online. So flexible adapts, or how do I say it? Flexible includes, by way of definition, even the hybrid online learning. But because we're in Metro Manila, we're in the Bonifacio Global City in Taguig, one of the financial centers of the Philippines, we can't really conduct hybrid classes. So we were forced to do online learning. Now, personally, what I do is to follow this framework devised by our assist. So LaSalle, our university, has this uh, academic support office. So that includes educational technologies and other things, other techniques, strategies that are outside the normal or the usual and regular classroom activity. So, for example, right now, because of this, we were forced to adopt the learning management system, Canvas. Now, Canvas is it's a learning management system that that integrates everything. In fact, Canvas was adopted by LaSalle. We brand our Canvas as Animo Space. So Canvas or Animo Space was adopted by LaSalle early last year. So we weren't forced to adopt it just because of pandemic. The edtech people of the university saw it fit to adopt this, and I was very happy because when I was doing my master's abroad, this learning management system, Canvas, was used by the bigger law schools or not only law schools, but the universities to which these law schools are attached. For example, the University of Michigan, we have Canvas in Harvard, in Yale, in I think in Stanford, in Berkeley, in the California University UC system, Oxford, all of those big universities and their law school unit have Canvas. So what I did in Canvas, of course, it's a blank space, diba? In Canvas, it's a blank space that yes, that is a platform. But that platform is only a platform and without any content, it's just a technology. So a
Yes.
technology, a neutral ground. So it's important for you to have your own, to know the pedagogical and even the maybe educational principles that will govern you on how to how to insert the content or what content to produce, what kind of activities do you include, and what activities, what content, and what are the assessment tools that are you going to use. So here, I just follow the system or just follow the principles, the principles that were recommended by our unit, the assist. So basically, in all the modules that I have, so I'm now on my, I think, ninth or 10th module. Seven pa pala. So going on eighth module. So I teach obligations and contracts. In the modules that I have, I always use this four things or these tools that were recommended by our by Assist, DLSU Assist. We
Okay.
start with discover, and then discuss, then demonstrate or deepen. So that's basically the framework of my ODL of how I teach obligations and contracts. The four Ds: discover, discuss, demonstrate, deepen.
Okay. So that's actually if we are going to relate that with the theory of transactional distance by Moore, uh, the four Ds that you mentioned, sort of that framework, would actually refer to the structure. Okay, that
Mm-hmm.
one of the two variables mentioned by Moore. So when we talk about structure, it refers to the uh, learning objectives, the content,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
theme, as well as the evaluation procedures that you conduct. Are you given the entire freedom uh, to design to design the course package, or does De La Salle through its administration dip its finger in how you
No.
package your course?
Yeah, we were given complete freedom. The four Ds are just recommendations.
Mm.
So that faculty members can use. In fact, these four Ds are actually actually more applicable in undergrad. Hindi ko na lang binago. Well, the reason why I adopted this is because I saw the importance of the 4D framework.
Mm.
But when you look at law school, it's more of a the order of the 4Ds is different. For example, in undergrad, so it's discover because the undergraduate students will be given reading materials. So basahin niyo, you read those things, so they discover, and then during class, they will or the premise is before class, they will try to, or even during class, they will discuss it amongst themselves. So, what is this? What is that? And then try to come up with some knowledge or some understanding. And then they demonstrate what they learned. And then lastly, deepening. Deepening. Now, in law school, I think yes, the 4Ds are applicable in law school, but the way they are structured is quite different because when you go to law school in the traditional sense of law school, the discovering aspect, the discussion aspect, or even the discovering, discussion, demonstration aspect should happen. The discovering the discussing and the deepening aspect should happen all before classes.
Mm.
What happens during class is the demonstration. So in the traditional law school pedagogy, for example, Socratic method, the way professors will teach class is, well, ideally, they will ask students questions, testing them on how enough and how well they've read the material. Then try to come up with reasons or meanings or purposes why the law is like that. What is the reason behind the law? Well, ideally, that should be the case. But, in traditional, in legal education, especially in the Philippines, it's basically parroting the book. So some professors would just check the book, ask, what is this? What is that? More of the lower order thinking for recall, understanding. So not really the analysis part, the evaluation part. But the idea is during the demonstration, the latter part of because in the 4Ds, demonstration happens, it's the third D. But in law school, in the traditional sense of law school, it should be the last D. Students discover, read the materials beforehand. They try to discuss this amongst themselves during outside class. They are required to deepen their knowledge about it before class, so that by the time they go to class rather, they demonstrate their knowledge to the law professor. But again, I didn't bother rearranging the 4Ds because I saw its value, and it's quite applicable to law school, especially I have the sufficient leeway when it comes to the creation of the content and the structure. So the DLSU administration just gives some guidelines or what you can do, or at least give us some working knowledge, what you can consider, and then it's up to you as a faculty, and it's well within your academic right, your academic freedom to choose what you want to teach and structure how you want to teach that. So it's basically, especially in law school, the university, maybe in other universities, they can control to some extent the way college professors teach. But in law school, because the faculty members are lawyers, and
Mm.
the ego and pride of many lawyers, that if you meddle with the way they teach, they equate it already to their actual knowledge of the law, when in fact it's different.
Yeah.
So in law school, it is more academic freedom is there is sufficient academic freedom, especially in LaSalle, because the administration doesn't really meddle with us when it comes to the teaching paradigm and pedagogy.
Okay. So you've mentioned while ago the Socratic method, and how often do you conduct? Uh, because in this method, the Socratic method, this would really be entail a high degree of dialogue, because there's a provision of two-way communication between you and the teacher. And by employing the Socratic method, you're actually reducing or lessening the transactional distance. Okay?
Mhm.
So, uh, could you give us a view of how you conduct this?
Okay. I conduct Socratic method every week.
Hmm.
Almost every after the module, or in fact in the middle of the module, I have to conduct Socratic method. Now, if it were my if it were my way, if I have it my way, uh, I would want to lessen the use of Socratic method. But remember, the hands of law school professors are tied. All the factors that we've identified, for example, where did the student graduate? Uh, what's the socioeconomic status of the student? Was the student an honor student in college? Was the student an honor student law school? Of all those factors, only the consistent, regular use of Socratic method had a significant correlation towards passing the bar exam.
Oh,
So
really?
we can't, yes, sorry, Dean,
Oh,
I
yeah.
lost you there.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
So
Oh,
mhm. the Socratic method is the only variable that appeared to have a significant positive correlation between passing the bar exam. So the idea is this: the more a law school consistently and regularly use Socratic method, even if your student is not an honor student in college or even in law school, even if your student are not rich or when it comes to socioeconomic status, regardless of their gender and sex, there is a chance for them, or there is a higher chance. I'm not saying that they will pass the bar exam. It's not attributional, it's just correlational. There is a chance for them to pass the bar exam if there is a consistent and regular use of the Socratic method. So that's why, based on that, taking off from that premise, I really cannot afford not to use this. Another reason, so that's the second reason. First is hands are tied. Second, I cannot afford to use it. Well, actually, those are one and the same. Actually, the second reason and the other important reason is this. When you look at the literature about ODL, online distance learning, there's a big problem when there's a big problem, or there's always a comment that ODL is usually impersonal. Impersonal meaning to say that, yes, I'm learning, but I'm not seeing my professor. I'm not talking to my to my co-students. Yes, there's chat, there's email, but it isn't enough. And that is more glaring when we employ the asynchronous mode. If it's asynchronous completely, there will be no chance for the students to meet other students, even through chat. You don't have any common time to meet. You don't see your professor. So the learning experience is quite impersonal. And when we were forced to shift online in during the last semester, I took the initiative to have this student assessment form, which I created. The student assessment form shows the evaluation from the student shows that yes, it really confirms what the literature said, that the ODL is quite impersonal, and many of the students are asking for the employment of Socratic method, because for them it's important, because some students have the tendency to slack off, so they wanted to be always on their toes, and the way for you to do that is synchronous, or through the Socratic method.
Okay. So, yes, that actually also confirms the another dimension mentioned by Michael Moore, that we should not just look at transactional distance on the area of teaching behaviors, particularly on providing a dialogue and structure, but more so, as you've mentioned, on how students feel that they feel that the learning process is impersonal, or maybe they feel that they are isolated, even if even if there is a learning that occur. That dimension is actually referring to Moore's learner autonomy, right? How great, how high their motivation is. Can they work independently on their own, even if there is no consistent feedback from the teacher? Okay, so in the research that you've mentioned, I was really struck when you stated that the Socratic method, the use of Socratic method, has a direct correlation on the percentage of your bar performance, of a student's bar performance. Okay? Regardless of their whatever status that they have. But the more that you use the Socratic method, the greater their chance is for the bar exams. And Socratic method, as I've mentioned a while ago, it's actually a synchronous online activity, right?
Yes.
Because you have to
Yes.
ask the students a lot of questions uh, while you are in a video conference. So In that way, the students immediately get feedback, because that would also confirm the theory that not just any interaction is a form of dialogue. Um, uh, Dialogue refers to a purposive and constructive and valued interaction, where the students are given feedback on the process of their, or on the pacing of their learning. Are they making progress on their learning? Okay, so in employing this Socratic method, there is also that area where, well, okay, we conduct the Socratic method, but I based on my experience, there are teachers who just ask the questions, but they do not tell you the correct answer. So there is an interaction, but there's no dialogue. Okay, how do you uh, conduct your Socratic method?
Yeah.
Do you immediately provide maybe qualitative feedback, because, or do you
Good
give
question po.
immediately the grade after
Good question, Dean.
yes,
I always pride myself in being one of the, if not the most transparent law professor. The grades are right after the session. I give the grades.
okay,
uh, because we have, fortunately, we have that function feature in Canvas. We have the marks or the grade function. The
yes,
students will already see that. But if you're not that really, if you're a professor, it's not really that transparent. Even if you have that feature, but you don't populate it, then it's useless, right? So
yes,
if, as a matter of policy, I'm not transparent, why on earth would I use marks? That function of marks or grade. But on my end, I always use that because even before the pandemic, my teaching style is this. I still employ grade cards because grade cards are, I think, important in ensuring that students are on their toes.
yes,
But the grade cards are always with my Beadle. I don't keep the grade cards. I use a special ink so that they can't uh, alter the grade. They can't forge anything. I have a special pen with me, and I would readily know whether a grade has been altered. But that's the risk that I am willing to take because for the sake of transparency.
wow,
So right after the class, I will leave the grade cards with the Beadle and then check your grade. I don't care because that's the grade. Remember, the grade is only the recitation grade is the snapshot. It's only a mere snapshot of the performance of the student at that particular moment. I always emphasize that to my class. So if you got a grade of say 75, then you're 75 at that particular moment. So
okay,
I don't say na it's your grade for the entire, obviously it's not their grade for the entire course, but it's only a snapshot. And that's why I am really comfortable in leaving that because I can always defend myself. Oh, you did not do good in this particular question. And here in online learning, I give students, aside from the quantitative one, the grades, I also give qualitative. For example, if I really found the student very good, the recitation of the student very good, uh, I am not, how do I say this? I am very generous when it comes to making compliment. Because the Socratic method, the reason why it is the gold standard in legal education pedagogy is the fact that it gives immediate feedback. Immediate feedback in the sense, for example, verbal. So if you give an answer to, if a professor asks you a question, you give an answer. There's immediate feedback. Verbal. The professor would say, "Oh, you did not study. Sit down." It can be verbal positively. So you study, okay, good. The professor gave follow-up questions because the professor knew that you can still answer those questions. You are on your right track. But aside from the verbal feedback, there's also the non-verbal feedback. For example, in law schools, for example, a professor would hate your answer. The professor would, I hope that it's not typical in your law school dean, but a professor can kick the table, throw the whiteboard eraser, all of those things, or all those things. Those are feedback, or
yes,
even as subtle as the professor will just raise his or her eyebrow. That's a feedback. And those are the things that make Socratic method very important in law school because of its immediacy. I readily give the grades, the quantitative assessment. I give qualitative assessment to the student. And especially, for example, if I ask a question, the student doesn't, uh, if the student answers it or is near to the answer that I am looking for, then I will say, okay, you're near. I nudge the student a little bit. Oh, so what does it mean? Or if we're going to follow your logic, would your answer still be the same in this case or in this set of facts? So I usually nudge students uh, to if their answers are quite near to my expectation. If they really don't know, and then I will just tell them, or I'll just call another student. Or if the answer is glaringly wrong, what I usually do is this. I'll call another student and ask the student, do you agree to the answer or do you agree with the answer given by student A? Student B, do you agree with the answer given by student A? If their answers are wrong, I will call another student. So obviously the students know that the answers given were wrong, but I'm looking for the reason why the answers were wrong. And that's why I'll call students to do that. So those are the feedback, the so to
Yes,
speak,
yes,
the
yes.
immediate feedback at the very least that I give in uh, when I employ Socratic method, pre and post during pandemic.
Uh, how you employ Socratic method, that the immediacy of feedback is valued by the students, okay? Because that would enable them to see their progress. Okay? And
Mhm.
that's actually also a very critical area in the theory of transactional distance, because if this if in through the dialogue, where if there is a two-way provision of communication, okay, where that the interaction is constructive, valued, and purposive, okay, then that means that the distance is somehow reduced. Okay, so
Mhm.
the transactional distance is low. Okay, but let me just look at the another dimension, no? In on learners' autonomy. We always say in law school that law school, once you are in law school, you should know that this is a self-directed study. You should be independent. Okay, but based on maybe just a grasp of your students on their performance, how do you gauge their the the degree of their autonomy as learners? Do you think that they can tolerate uh, a high degree of transactional distance? Like of course, you know that in law school there are some professors, as I've said, that even if they employ the Socratic method, they do not provide immediate feedback, or they conduct quizzes or other activities, but they do not immediately give the result of the quiz. You just have a grade at the end of the semester.
Semester.
So
Mhm.
let since you've said that you are very transparent, okay, and you provide immediate feedback, could you still see somehow the that characteristic in law school, that it's a self-directed study and all the learners are independent, they should be self-motivated? Do you still see that in law school now?
Well, actually, to be honest, unfortunately, that's not the case in the Philippines. Uh, I'm one of the more progressive professors. I'm one of those who think that students should have the liberty, what to study, all of those things. But the problem is, because of the system that we have, it really calls, and by implication, the student calls for their professors to be strict because they don't have that tendency to be autonomous or self-directed. Even in LaSalle, in our handbook, it's the premise is the moment we accept you, you are mature individuals. You will study even if you're not told to study, you will study because it's part of the contract that you have with the school. And more so in a law school, because you are not only a college, you've already earned your bachelor's degree. Some even have PhDs or even master's degree.
Yeah.
But at the very least, you need to be directed with or without the professor. You need to be there, and that's the reason why, unlike in college or even in high school, we call our professors, our law professors, regardless of the rank, we call them professors. They're not teachers. They are here to profess the law. They know the law. They have expertise about the law. Their goal is to profess the law. When you say profess the law, I'll just talk about the law. These are the nuances in the law, and then that's it. I it's not my goal. It's not theoretically. It's not my objective to really teach you what the law is. It's your goal to teach yourself what the law is. I'll give you what the law is. It's for you to teach yourself and understand and grasp, hopefully memorize what the law is. That's why they're called professor. They profess what they know. And even college, they still use the term professor. Unlike in high school, teacher. So they will teach, they will guide you, because the circumstances in high school call for that. But in law school, theoretically speaking, the students on their own should learn or should have that initiative to learn on their own. Problem is, if you look at our system, the system doesn't call for that thing, because the system really requires you, the student, to be first. If you look at the Socratic method, the other reason why the Socratic method was adopted is because it basically simulates the what happens in a court. The student acts as the lawyer, the judge acts as the lawyer or the advocate, the judge acts as the professor acts as the judge. So the judge will try to, in a usual case, in a usual courtroom, the judge will try to elicit from the advocate what are the facts, what is the law, and how do you apply the law to a given set of facts. The same goes in law school. So the student is the advocate, the professor is the judge. But the problem here is that we don't motivate, or we don't it's basically fear based. It's fear based.
Mm.
So long as we have that culture that it is fear based, so long as the student will always think that I need to learn because I might be shamed. I need to learn because I need to display how well I learned in class, then it won't really motivate them to be self-directed. When I compared it to the kind of the educational system in the United States or even in other countries, the students there learn because they want to learn. They enroll in that subject because they want to know more about that subject. The course structure is quite, they only have a number of core subjects, the rest elective. So if a student enrolls, let's say, in securities regulation, they are there because they want to learn securities regulation, not forced upon them. Except for contracts, for civil procedures, those are the core courses. So they are really there to learn, and they pay a very high tuition fee, and that's another added reason why they need to learn on their own. But in the Philippines, students here are forced to learn because you look at the curriculum, everything is forced. So there's no degree, no freedom on the part of the student to uh, to select courses that they want to learn on their own. Everything is forced. And why are those things forced? Because of the bar exam. Those subjects might be or are likely to be asked in the bar exam. So no freedom on that end. The students are because of that, it demotivates. That's my theory. It demotivates the student from being self-directed.
Um, let's just proceed with this blanket prohibition on by the Legal Education Board on distance education. Given your experience and being an advocate of legal education reforms, do you think that the Legal Education Board should remove this blanket prohibition so that schools are given the freedom to employ or to adopt distance education?
I would dare say that number one, the LEB should not be in the process of prohibiting things left and right. If you read Pimentel versus LEB, so the Supreme Court said, okay, academic freedom. So the LEB should not be in the business of prohibition. They should be in the business of regulation. Now, the trick here is how to regulate ODL in such a way that many of those law schools that actually some of them are still existing, that are really diploma mill in by nature, will not abuse it. Now, what are my proposals, if I may give them? First is we can regulate ODL in such a way that you only allow ODL to those laws. First is this: there may be a capping in terms of accreditation of courses learned via ODL. For example, uh, maybe a student may earn a JD degree if via ODL, if they spent, let's say, only 25% of those degrees that were obtained via ODL, they can accredit it for purposes of earning a JD degree. Right now, required, all classes should be required on site. By fiat of the MC Memorandum Circular 56, I think, or 57 of the LEB, some of the subjects that are offered purely online may be accredited. LEB can do that particular model, and what they can do is limit it, have a cap. Only 25% can be accredited towards a JD degree. For example, the students can choose, or the law schools can choose. We'll offer, if there are 150 or 170 units required in the model curriculum, or 160, or 25%, 160 divided by 4, 40, 40 credits, 40 units, purely ODL, pwede yun. Or the other route is this: the LEB can require that only the core subjects should be on site. There's an endless possibility when it comes to ODL. And part of that possibility is being abused. That's why we need to regulate it.
Maraming
Thank
salamat
you, Dean.
ulit.
Salamat po. Ingat po and stay safe
Okay,
po.
keep safe. Yes, God bless.
Opo, bye-bye. God bless you too.
Let us now wrap our discussion on the theory of transactional distance with our interview with Attorney Justin Subkang. So it is important for us to note that transactional distance is present in any educational event, not only in distance education, but also in face-to-face or conventional education. The reason for this is because transactional distance does not refer to geographical distance, but it actually refers to the psychological or communication gap between the teacher and the learner. In under this theory of transactional distance, Michael Moore explored the variables of teaching behaviors, particularly uh, dialogue and structure, as they interplay with the dimension of learner autonomy. According to Moore, these teaching behaviors, particularly dialogue and structure, are greatly influenced by the educational philosophy of an educational organization as well as the teachers. So for law schools, their educational philosophy is influenced by the philosophy that they want to replicate the litigation procedures in court in their classes, in the classroom. That is why it is no surprise that the Socratic method was predominantly used. And in fact, it is considered as the gold standard of pedagogy among law schools. It is on this backdrop that we had a discussion with Attorney Sukang in his as we look at the dialogue that the dialogue and the structure in his in the law school, as well as their impact, okay, or their effect on learner autonomy. So based on our interview with him on dialogue, which actually refers to the series of interaction that is meaningful, purposive, and valued by the learners. So the interaction that he had with his students is through synchronous and asynchronous activities. Okay? But we focused more on the synchronous activities. Okay? And in the synchronous activity, this is actually a video conference where he employed the Socratic method. Okay? The Socratic method refers to a collaborative, argumentative approach and series of question and answer with the students in order to draw out from them ideas and certain presuppositions. Okay? It actually provokes critical thinking and analysis from the students. So he used the Socratic method whenever he conducts video conference with his students. And according to him, these synchronous activities provide a meaningful, purposive, and valued interactions because of the immediate feedback that he gives to his students. Okay? These immediate feedbacks are valued because they tell the students as to the progress or degree of their understanding with the topics discussed in class. We also look at the structure, this particular teaching behavior on structure. This refers to the elements of course design, particularly on the fixing the learning objectives, the content, the themes of the content, the employment of the teaching strategies, the teaching methods. Okay? All of this would refer to the structure. And the course design in law schools is actually more rigid, okay? Because this is anchored on the curriculum. Okay? And the curriculum is dictated, okay, by the Legal Education Board. Okay? The law schools do not have much freedom in the curriculum. Okay? But since the curriculum have already been pre-designed, the only freedom where the teachers have would be on the course design. But again, the course design is rigid because it's affected by the trying to replicate the litigation procedure in court. So even the fixing of learning objectives and the teaching strategies that will have to be employed must be anchored with the how litigation is how litigation takes place in our courts. So these two teaching behaviors, okay, of dialogue and structure, of course, would be would have an impact on learner autonomy. And we look at this dimension of learner autonomy. And in law schools, since the it's really bar oriented, meaning the curriculum, the course design are all anchored on how the bar examinations are being conducted. There is really limited learner autonomy. Okay? The different capacities of the learners to decide on the progress of their teaching, of their learning is limited, okay, in law schools. And another important item that we discussed with Attorney Subkang is the blanket prohibition of distance education in legal education. And he said that the rationale for this blanket prohibition of distance education is because of the evolution of the diploma mills in some law schools. Okay? There are law schools who have still really very low performance in the performance rating in the bar examinations. So that's why distance education is prohibited, okay? Because they could not really regulate the evolution of these diploma mills. The second one is the tendency of abuse. Okay, so since the Legal Education Board could not really regulate, okay, or there's really no strict regulation on the part of the Legal Education Board, there is really a tendency that distance education will be abused in law schools. That's why he proposed, of course, certain solutions, because he also considered that distance education has wide potential and possibilities in legal education, and this is something that we should also take advantage of, because distance education has the possibility of democratizing access to quality legal education in law schools. So just because there are evolution of diploma mill law schools and the tendency of abuse should not stop the legal education to explore the possibility of distance education, because of the many advantages that it could offer to us. First and foremost, it's cost wise, okay? It's cost effective, and second, it will really enable more enrollees in law schools, because face-to-face education can prevent those students who are interested, but they are they could not by reason of family obligations, or because they are employed. Okay, so I am very hopeful that in the near future, distance education will be allowed, and that blanket prohibition will be rethink by our policymakers. So Attorney Subkang proposed these two solutions. First is that we employ distance education, but we limit it only to core. We limit it to uh, subjects that are elective. Okay, for core subjects, maybe this would really be face-to-face or conventional, but for elective subjects, we can employ distance education. Okay? However, in order for us to do this, there must be an intentional identification of what the core subjects are. Because at present, as he mentioned, most of the subjects in the law curriculum are considered as core subjects. Okay? And the second proposal is that there must be a strict and close regulation of law schools. Okay? Any policy would be good, but if the enforcement is bad, then it will really also affect. It will also affect how distance education will be employed. Okay, so I would like us uh, to end our discussion on this quote by Moore and Kersley. Okay? And they mentioned that what determines the success of distance teaching is the extent to which the institution and the individual learners, okay, or instructors are able to provide the appropriate structure in design of learning materials and the appropriate quantity and quality of dialogue between the teacher and the learner, taking into account the extent of the learner's autonomy. In other words, we try to look at a learner that the degree of learner autonomy. The more autonomous the learner is, the higher transactional distance can he tolerate or can he be comfortable with. Okay? Uh, of course, the goal in any educational institution is to reduce transactional distance by increasing dialogue, okay? Maybe from asynchronous to synchronous activities, or even to the extreme, face-to-face education, by providing, of course, sufficient and appropriate structure. Okay? So this is transactional distance in as seen or as applied in law schools. So thank you very much. I hope that through our discussion, you're able to see how this theory is applied in law schools. Okay, so we thank, of course, our speaker, Attorney Justin Subkang, for his precious time and the insights that he shared to us. Okay, until next time, see you. Bye.